Hello again. In this video, I'd like to begin discussion of our material in our textbook, the Beginning Google Maps Mashups. And by now you're probably working in Chapter 2 or maybe still finishing up Chapter 1. Chapter 1 was pretty short and mainly introductory material and an introduction to the Geo Web, he calls it. And I thought I had some very interesting points to make in there, and hope you enjoyed that chapter. I've got a digital or electronic copy of the book as well, and so I'm going to try to use that as I make these videos over the coming weeks, especially related to the book here. I'll try to use this so that I can zoom in on sections of the book and things like that to help you see where I'm located in the discussion. A couple points about the book. The book was 2009. Though that's not very long ago, it's already dated in internet mapping terms, as you may have noticed. We used this book the last time we taught the class was I think I had it about 3 years ago, and I like the book a lot. Part of the reason I stuck with the book is because of the format that he uses and the approach he uses in the book. I think is a very hands-on and practical, very applied. He's got a case example that we'll build throughout the book. Typically, we've only used about the first third to first maybe a quarter or almost half even of the book, I guess. We haven't made it all the way through the book in any of the classes yet. That's because he covers. He's kind of got three sections in this book, and we typically go through the first section and then move on to some other things. And then what I like to do is then come back to it if time permits and if there's interest in the class and working with some of that material. The first third gets your feet wet, so to speak, with using Google Maps and in terms of programming and making your own customized online maps. And it's pretty neat, and the students usually like this portion of the book, and so we'll see where we go from there, um, uh, depending on how much material we cover in the other subjects. But another point to make about the book is that because it is a little dated, the Google API, they call it, which you've read in the book, is Application Programming Interface. This is version 2 is what's used in this book, and version 3 has been out for a couple years or more now. And the Google, I just found out, is actually going to depreciate the version 2 API in May. So we're lucky in that we can still use it until May, but in May you'll have to switch to version 3. I haven't experimented with version 3 myself very much yet, so I can't tell you how much of what we have in this book will directly transfer into version 3. But at least this will get us started with it, and that's the main intent, is to get you used to doing some of this basic kind of programming, so that you can see how these kinds of online maps work. And even with the version 3 API, it's going to be very similar in approach, and the principle of it's going to be very similar. Another reason we use the book is because the class, we didn't know for sure if the class was going to make, and so we didn't really have time to change books, so we kept this book. And but like I say, I like the book a lot. I like the case study that it builds in the book, very practical approach, and I haven't found that in the other books that I've looked at. So we'll go from there. Let me show you a few slides here. Let me switch over. I've got two windows on my end, and so bear with me here. I'll get things going. The author has an online website you can go to. He's got the address in the book, and it will take you to this page. And if you haven't done so already, go here and you can download the source code. Not a very big download, and we'll use that. And I'll show you a little bit about how I've set it up on my end, and then you can maybe replicate the way I'm doing it if you like. After you download the source code, let me show you how I organized it on my end, and you might want to try to replicate this on your end. On the C drive, you should have a folder for GIS-211 that you created earlier in the semester. And inside that folder, I believe you created a class EX1 through a class EX3, and I think I asked you to create a practice and a project. And these all are pretty self-explanatory. And so what I did is I downloaded mine. I created an archive folder, which would be good for, you might use it throughout the class to save your zip files from your original source data, or in this case code, so that you can have an original copy of it somewhere. And by creating it here on the root of the GIS-211, we keep it separated from the other folders such that it doesn't double up on the data. In other words, if I wanted to zip up any one of these folders, I could do so without including the original zip file information. So what I did under Archive, I created a subfolder called BGMM for Beginning Google Maps Mashups. And if you were doing this same logic for other, assignments or whatever, and you wanted to keep your original source code separate, you could create a subfolder for them, basically replicate what you have out on the 211 folder. But anyway, here I created this BGMM, and inside there, you would have your zip file. Now, I unzipped mine and forgot to delete it and keep the zip, but this is where you would have basically either your original zip file, or in my case, I've got the actual files that have not been altered. And so I'll save those there. And then what I did is back out on my 211 drive, I created a folder called My BGMM. So that's logically the place where I can put my versions of the source code. And to start things off with, once I created that folder, I just copied over from my archive the same folder set into this subfolder. And this way I can alter these files and still have my original out there saved in the archive folder. So you might try something like that, and I think it'll help you to keep things a little better organized. And as far as file types, while I'm in here, I want to show you that files that end with the .js, JS is for JavaScript, and you'll see these throughout some of the chapters. Not all of them have them, but like in chapter 2, for example, you'll see a little bit of each of the three types that you're going to run into with this book. And it's JavaScript files with the .js, HTML files, and CSS files. And again, by having them under the My BGMM folder, then I've got, I still have my archive out there. If any of these get corrupted, or I accidentally delete one, or any number of things could happen, then I can easily go back into my archive folder and just pull over what I need. So if something happened while I was working in chapter 2, I can go in here into chapter 2, and I've got my original files here. I can just copy them and paste them over in my other folder. The publisher of this book has a website as well, so you can follow this link and it will take you to the publisher's page. And if you're interested in buying the ebook like I've done, you can purchase it there as well. Certainly don't have to, because you have the source code, so you don't really need it. I just wanted to show you here that they've got tabs where you can also download the source code, and he has a link for errors in the book, but there's nothing published there right now. So so anyway, you can get a description of it here, and you can also see other interesting books that you might want to look into after the class. If you find this material interesting and you want to delve further into it, then check out some of their other resources. And I went to a page here just to show you that there are several other ones out, but there's a more current, there's a version for the API 3, and I guess this is the one I would suggest buying if you like this material and you want to buy another book. This seems to be one of the most up-to-date versions that I've been able to find, and but it's not written by the same author. So I don't think I have the book actually, but I haven't went through it yet. But I don't think he follows the same kind of a case study example like the one we're using. So this would be a good follow-up book once you have some competency with the material that you'll get out of the book we're using. So just keep that in mind. You might want to look into this Beginning Google Maps API 3. Now, the author of our book, back on his page, you see he's into a few other things here. He's got his own site. He has another book on what they call the gadgets. He has this satellite-friendly service where he's traveled around the country at one point collecting information about campgrounds and stuff to see how good a reception they've got for satellite use. And he even has a site all set up for that, and you'll see that some in our textbook because he uses that for some of the examples. And so I'll follow this link just so you can see it. But it's kind of interesting. It looks like he's set it up towards interactive, and doesn't look like it's been updated real recently from what I can tell. But anyway, you might want to check that out just for fun. But again, it's a campground directory, and he has a lot of the campgrounds around the country in it. And it's more designed from an RV perspective, I believe. So if you're into RVing and you want to find out ahead of time what kind of reception you're going to have for your TV service, and that was his intent here to kind of help you with that. So like I say, for now we're going to go through part 1, the first third of the book, and again we'll see if we want to go back and maybe add a little bit more. I like some of the material in part 3, and if we have time it'd be nice to go back into that. But for part 1 you can see there's 5 chapters, and what he does in here is he starts with an example and then builds on that throughout the chapters. And so by the time you get through with chapter 5, you have a full-fledged working site that's pretty neat. And you can, he's written it in such a way that it's very easy to translate what we have for his example to any example that you might want to use. And so that's what I like to do in the class, is get you started with just working through his examples till you understand how they're working, and then you kind of tweak his code a little bit to use sites of your own. Now I know that many of you are very new to this kind of thing. In fact, myself, I'm pretty new at this as well. I mean, I've taken some classes on it over the years, but it's not something that I do frequently enough to be very proficient at it myself even. So I'm always finding each time I do this class I have to delve back into the material again myself and kind of relearn it as you're learning it. And but what's interesting is what I have found over the years is that I always think of more examples and maybe a few more ideas of how I can apply this in things that I'm doing in my work as well. And so it's interesting from that perspective, and I hope you'll find it interesting as well and be able to think of ideas and things that you can customize to use it in your own work as well. So in the introduction of the book, the author explains sort of how Google Maps came about and how it was basically the pioneer for developing this technology, getting things to where you could put a map on your website. That was a big deal, and that was only 5 or 6 years ago, and we've come a long way since then. But the whole idea of using this technology for putting maps on websites and things like that started with Google. He goes through how the book is structured, tells you a little bit about the chapters that's coming up, and I'll just sort of leave that for you guys to read on your own. Well, then in chapter 1 he gets into more information on the Geo Web, what it is, and some hypothetical examples of how it could be used. He uses some examples with newspapers, for example, of the fact that if you have a location information for a news story, then you could publish these news stories on a Geo Web, which would make the information a lot more accessible on a spatial level. And he gets into a little bit about RSS and GeoRSS, which a lot of you probably have heard of RSS. I think it's a real simple syndication. And you can go to a lot of websites. They'll have a little icon that's a little orange, just kind of orange colored icon that let you, if you click on that, and if you have something like Google Reader, for example, is a good one. You can link, basically have stories piped into your own Reader account. So you sort of a way of customizing news that you might receive and things like that. And you can customize the information that is sort of pushed over to you instead of you having to go out and find it as much. That's sort of the idea there. And it's good in both directions. It's handy for you because it lets you customize the information you receive, and information providers like it because they can uh, get subscribers to their various types of information. It lets them know what people are interested in, and it lets them kind of customize what they're sending you as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. And then if you think of that information with some location information embedded within it, that's where the Geo RSS comes in to play, and that makes the information even more powerful because it ties it to a location. And so you're starting to see some of these Geo RSS services pop up. And some of you, when you were looking at examples of online mapping services and things like that, may have come across a site like TDOT, for example. Let me see if I can pull that up here. So here I've pulled up the TDOT site, and this is, they call it their Smart Way or Smart Map. And you can actually get an app now and put this on your cell phone, which is kind of handy. It's a little clunky. It's better than it used to be. But it's still, I've noticed some little bugs with it still on the zooming and things like that. But just to give you an example, this is, of course, this is a nice online interactive system, and you can click on the little incident icons here, and it will make a little pop-up that describes to you what has happened at that location and so forth. But the Geo, if you notice in the lower left here, they've got a Geo RSS link, and you can see the little orange icon there that I mentioned. And if you click on that, it will take you to a RSS feed site that you can basically subscribe to any of these types of information off of their service. So, for example, if you wanted to get information pushed to you about incidents that are going on, you can follow that link, and it takes you to a page where you can subscribe. Now, if I subscribe to this, it would open up in my Google Reader, and it would basically just store a path there that would in the future push this information to me. I don't want to subscribe right now because I just wanted to use this as an example, but I wanted to point out you can also just click directly on the page on any of these links. So if you notice there's an incident on Interstate 40 and eastbound in Shelby County, for example, and I can follow that link, and it will take me to Google Maps and open up and put an icon on there for me where that incident is. So I can open that up, and you can see it. It basically gives you a lot of the same information that their service did. So in a way, you wonder, well, why would you want this? But it's just an example of this information, and you could save this in your reader, of course, and then without having to go to their site directly, you could access this information indirectly through your reader program, and then it would open up in Maps whenever you clicked on a link. I guess one other advantage it would have in here is you've got the street view as well that you can zoom into, so they don't seem to have that on their site yet. So, but anyway, that's just an example of a site that I've noticed that does have a Geo RSS feed to it, and you're starting to see those pop up more frequently. Then the author goes on to talk about mashups and what they are, and how they can be useful. And that's what we're going to be doing a bit of as well. I mean, we're going to be taking information, which a mashup is basically taking information that exists already on some other site, combining it with some functionality which is provided through our code in the Google Maps API, and we can customize that and then pull in information from other web resources and include those in our map as well. So we'll do a little more of the mashups as you get into chapter 3 and through 5, but we start off building our functionality first, and then we'll start to pull in other resources. And at that point is when you're really getting into more of a mashup. So anyway, the mashups have become very popular, and a lot of the sites that you find online now, both spatial GIS related as well as just other sites. Um, a lot of photo sharing services and things like that are being utilized in making these mashups. So when you think of a mashup, just think of it as something that you're borrowing information from other internet resources out on the web and pulling that in to your own service. He gets into a discussion of XML and GeoXML. So many of you may have heard the term XML. Um, I think it's extended markup language, and in my amateur terms, I kind of think of XML as like HTML, which is more familiar. You know, hopefully everybody has at least heard of HTML, and hopefully some of you have probably worked with it a little bit as well. But if you build your own website, for example, or even if you use a tool that builds a website for you, somewhere HTML is getting written in the background. And XML is just more of a standardized protocol within that arena. You've got HTML is think of that as pretty broad. It's a coding language that lets you design websites. Okay, and XML gives a little more standards um, to that process. And that's his point here, is that he's trying to point out that for the Geo Web to become the reality that he thinks it will, and as evidence in the last couple of years, you can see it is actually being realized now. Um, you need to have some standards for that. And so one of the things I like about his approach is that he emphasizes real strongly the importance of these standards and following these standards in your coding scheme. And just in general, just kind of think about it like this: when you're coding, you're programming for designing these types of online maps, you can get kind of sloppy with that code, and you can add code in there that might not follow to a standard, I guess. So it's just a roundabout way of getting at the fundamental thing of saying, hey, it's important to have standards when we program. Then he moves on to KML, which is another standard that is been widely adopted now, and we're starting to see KML files everywhere now. And many of you have probably run into this with Google Earth if you use Google Earth. If you download some type of map from that somebody has created, like say you find a map that has hiking trails in Rocky Mountain National Park or something, it's likely to be stored in KML format, and KML is directly readable in Google Earth, and if you export out of Google Earth, you can export in KML as well. So KML has sort of become the de facto standard for a lot of these types of online maps, and it's even wide enough now that you may or may not be aware of, but in ArcGIS we even have the ability to read in, to import and export a KML file, and we'll do some of that here pretty soon. So that's what we're kind of building into, is taking some of the functionality that we're going to learn in these chapters and being able to take files and transport those into ArcMap, and maybe something out of ArcMap and into something that we can use in this online features that we're creating, or into Google Earth or something like that. But anyway, he has a little bit of the interesting history behind KML here and how it came about, and so forth. Then he gives you an example of a basic KML file. And let me blow this up a little bit where you can see it. Okay, and you'll notice now that, first of all, notice the approach he's using in here, and this is something we'll run into a lot. Now he's got listing 1.1, okay? And the way he does these sections is he'll list the one for chapter 1, and then it's the first item within chapter 1, basically. Now let me pull over the subfolder of the data source that we download. So here is the set of subfolders and files that gets created when you unzip the download code that you can get. And you can see he's got them organized. He's got the appendices here. We'll ignore that for the moment. But by the way, he does have a couple good appendices in the book. So one of them you might want to take a look at that he refers to from this first chapter, and I believe it's the one on the mapping fundamentals. And he talks a little bit about projections and has some good discussion about latitude, longitude, and just in general, I like the way he approaches that topic because, as many of you know from the 101 class, it's very complicated when you get into projections and can be easily confusing. So you might want to take a look at that sometime. But if we go into chapter 1 here, there are only 3 files in here, and they match what he, of course, has in the book under listing 1.1. He'll have a 1.2 and a 1.3. He follows that protocol throughout the book, and I just wanted to point that out. So it may seem kind of obvious, but if you're just looking at the files without the book handy, it can be a little confusing because you see there are different types of files. So he doesn't separate them. All of them are called listing something is what I'm getting at. So whether it's a KML, an XML, HTML, or JavaScript, they're all a listing. So that's the format he uses, and so you can sort of easily match up. So we're dealing with listing 01-01.kml, and it matches this listing in the book. And so we've got the hard copy and the electronic copy easily accessible now. And notice when I click on it, because I have Google Earth already installed on the computer here, that it puts the little Google Earth icon in that. It recognizes basically my file system on my computer recognizes a KML format file. So if I were to double click on this file, it would open automatically in Google Earth, which may be what you want it into, and it may not, depending on what you're doing. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, what I like is also is that he makes a big deal about emphasizing the importance, again, of the standards that we were talking about. And you'll notice some of that is occurring at the beginning of this file. He gives you the contents of the file where we were just looking at in our Windows Explorer. This this is what's in that file. Just, not many lines of code actually. And what we're going to do, and this is will hopefully put a lot of you at ease, is that we're basically going to take the code that he's written and use it for our work, and then we'll get into a little bit, and I'll try to demonstrate a little bit about how you can tweak that existing code to customize it for your needs. So you're not going to have to know how to program, say, in JavaScript from scratch. I've never even had a course in JavaScript myself. And I've been able to use some of this material out of this book for a lot of different things. So you can, it would help if you knew some JavaScript, and if you did, you could likely customize it even more. So it'd be a good thing to know, but don't feel intimidated if you've not had a programming class yet, which I know many of you have not. So I just wanted to let you know about that right off the bat. So when we're looking at these files, this first couple lines is basically standard information, okay? And he explains a little bit of it in the text, and he points out that he's not going to explain all of it, but he does a pretty good job, I think, of explaining it in the book. And so I'm not going to repeat a lot of that here, but I just wanted to highlight some of this and sort of get you used to the protocol that he uses and how we can merge that with what we're going to be doing. So that's the way we'll approach this. But in this code, you can see that these things in brackets, okay, are called tags. And so we've got this tag here I just highlighted is a placemark tag. And HTML uses tags. And so if any of you have worked with websites at all, even if it's just a basic one, you can design with as few lines of code as he has here, you can design a little very simple web page. And so knowing HTML is a good thing, and 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 it's not very hard to pick up. I'm still a beginner at it myself, but it's very logical once you kind of look at it. And so a lot of this stuff, even though you'll hear the terms XML and KML and things like that, for our purposes, when you see the code in here, just think of it like it's HTML. I think at least those kinds